Hey everybody, this is TruePowerIsMine, the host of TPIMSR Live. This show has been pre-recorded, so let's roll the clip.
And as you know, Mark is not his real name. He's really not from Anaheim. Let me give you a little bit of his background, though, for those of you who don't know who he is. During the early 1900s, Mark from Anaheim joined the legendary Vietnam War veteran David Hackworth and others to present an alternative to the John Birch Society far right-wing agenda that was being presented on talk radio by the likes of, Ollie North and G. Gordon Liddy. Mark is both a retired U.S. Marine Corps Mustang infantry officer and a retired LAPD patrol supervisor. He's provided intelligence briefings to high-ranking U.S. Armed Forces personnel, assisted both the state of California and the U.S. Department of Defense rewrite police tactics manuals, and he has provided counterterrorism training to U.S. State Department and NATO personnel. Now, since retiring, Mark has returned to life as what he terms a lazy surfing beach bum, where he spends much of his time coaching and mentoring some of the most successful young female surfers from around the world. I'll tell you this, when Dick Greg was around, Dick Gregory said, keep this brother close. Dick Gregory called him an early warning system, if you will. So, Mark from Anaheim, welcome back to WOL Radio.
What's up? Mr. Nelson, how art thou?
Well, we are well so far, but after that trial yesterday, I told people that you train cops, so hopefully you'll help us out with the actual shooting. She shot him in the heart, and if that is, I don't know if the Dallas police force is different from LAPD, or some of the other, because you've trained cops from all over the world. If you can help us out, if that is, what could she have used some other kind of restraint other than having to shoot this brother in the heart?
Yeah, she could have stayed on her own damn floor in her own damn apartment. Come on, man. There's more to that story. Come on. And it's sad because I'm not laughing because, somebody lost his life in this tragic incident, but I never believed that story, man, that she went to the wrong apartment. I'll put this another way, Mr. Nelson. Let's say she had gotten a 911 call for emergency. What would they have done if she had entered the wrong apartment and shot somebody who was just sitting on the couch eating? Better yet, what if she had gone to an apartment with a white family and it wasn't even on the correct floor or the correct room number, and she had shot somebody who just happened to be sitting there eating at the time? So why are we applying different rules and protocol and police tactics and procedures in this incident? Especially when you got somebody who's outside after the shooting talking to her boyfriend on the job, instead of rendering aid to the person she just shot. Come on, man. See, I just deal with the simplistics. I don't get into all the minutiae and go down the rabbit holes. I just deal with the basics. That story stunk from day one.
So you think there's more to it? They're fooling around or something?
Well, when we come back from the break, I'll tell you what I thought, sir.
All right, it's real. 800-450-7876. Speak to Mark from Anaheim. We'll take your calls after the short break right here on AM 1450. WOL, where information is power.
DC News. News Talk 1450 WOL. Thanks you for listening. 39 years strong and worldwide at
And thank you for staying with us, folks. Our guest is Mark from Anaheim. Number to call to speak to Mark is 800-450-7876. Again, that's 800-450-7876. Before we left the break, I told you Mark, it's not his real name. He's really not from Anaheim, but he's multi-talented. And it's going to help us out with the shooting of both on Jean by Amber Geiger. So, Mark, I'm going to let you finish your thought.
Well, before I get to Amber, I just want to say that I'm dedicating this show today. Well, first of all, Mr. Nelson, thank you for having me on. As you know, I rarely come on the radio anymore, but I did promise Brother Dick Gregory that I would try to keep carrying the torch. So I know there's a lot of craziness going on, and a lot of your listeners out there have questions, and they have been bombarding me with questions since I haven't been coming on lately. So I want to thank them for always sending me support, prayers. And I dedicate this show today to Rosalie Pazant. I doubt seriously that most of the listeners have any idea who that is, but as you know, Ms. Nelson, I'm from the Low Country, South Carolina, Gullah Geechee, and she was the person who was the founder of the Gullah Festival down in Beaufort, South Carolina. One of my English school teachers, probably one of the best teachers I ever had. I was one of her worst students because I was always in trouble. But we'll never know how many people today are successful adults because of the fact that she took the time to work with us. Going to Battery Creek High School down in Beaufort, South Carolina, we'll just say the school board there wasn't exactly accommodating to that particular school in Beaufort County, and she had little to work with, but she gave it more than her all. And sadly, she left us a few years ago. She left us back in September 2010, but I will never forget the sacrifices that Rosalie Pazan, people like Esau Jenkins from Johns Island, September Clark, a lot of the black folks that unfortunately their names are not sounded out there as some of the more, famous folks, but these were the people behind the scenes that were doing all the dirty work down at ground zero to get us where we are today. And I'm sure, I'm not going to speak for Rosalie Pazan, but I would have to say that she's up there with Dick Gregory right now, probably shaking at their heads at the madness that's going on and the ignorance that some of us are showing down here on this planet, man. I mean, when you talk about that trial with Amber, Mr. Nelson, I got a strong stomach, and I've seen and done things you don't even want to know. I nearly puked yesterday when I heard this guy talking about, I didn't want to really see you go to prison. I really wish you would turn your life over to Christ, and can I give you a hug? And I'm like, damn, he just opened the door, and then the judge came in and opened the door even wider for this woman who got 10 years in prison to now go to prison, become a reformed, born-again Christian, be a model inmate, and I promise you, Mr. Nelson, she's not going to even do 10 years now because they've opened that door for that. What the hell? But before the trial, let's get back to the incident because, I posted about that minutes after the shooting. Because, I got friends all over the country. And, right now you got hundreds of cops that are probably listening to the show to hear what I got to say. And when I heard about that Dallas shooting, the first thing I say is, it looks like to me, I'm just saying, this is me, it looks like to me somebody violated Mark from Anaheim's rules. One, never get your honey where you get your money. Well, she was violating that, we find out later on. Don't date somebody who lives in your complex. And I don't know, Mr. Nelson. I think there was a little bit more going on there than what we've been told. I don't think it's by accident she just happened to go into his room on the wrong floor. But regardless of whether or not they had some prior relationship, the fact is, Mr. Nelson, I have come home to an open door at my residence. What do you think I did when I came home?
Backed out. That's what I would have done.
I got on the phone, called the local police, told them who I was, and especially living here in Orange County and being black, I am armed. I will stand by until you get here. You go inside my residence and make sure everything's okay before I go in. And I've got all kinds of weapons. I've got all kinds of training. I'm not going to walk into my own residence thinking I see somebody inside who shouldn't be there, and then I'm going to confront that person because I don't know if that person's there by him or herself. That whole story stinks. Seriously. And it's a tragic incident where a man has lost his life. I'm happy for his family that they're very forgiving. I only wish that they had contained their forgiveness out of the public view in such a manner that's going to now give her an opportunity to use that to get herself a shorter sentence. And as far as the judge's behavior, now correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Nelson, did the judge herself give this woman a Bible?
Yeah.
Oh, please. I've been in a lot of court cases. I've never seen a judge conduct him or herself in such a manner. That whole trial stinks. I'm surprised she got any time in Dallas. You have to remember, I don't forget, Dallas is the town where, an L.A. sheriff Viking was hired and later, tragically was killed along with several other cops in Dallas. And how did the House Negro chief of police respond to that? He used a robot attached to a bomb to blow up the suspect before we ever found out how the hell did that suspect have his Army discharge upgraded to where he was even able to buy those weapons. He's dead. Nobody's talking about it, and they moved on. And then that House Negro chief just quietly faded away from Dallas like he was never there. We got a lot of problems in this country, Mr. Nelson, and it's sad because it's usually something related to a police matter that sets off the violence out in the streets. People can't take it anymore, and unfortunately, if you look back on history, when it comes to civil unrest, rebellion, riots, whatever you want to call it, chances are it's connected to a police-related incident. So I prayed for both, Amber and the family. But I really wish, Mr. Nelson, that we as black folks don't always give certain people an out when they don't deserve it. And I personally believe by that display in the courtroom by the judge and by the grieving family, they have now given this woman an out to where she's not going to end up doing 10 years.
Let me ask you this, though. She confronted him, she said, show your hands, and then she shot him in the heart.
Yeah.
Is she a marksman, if you will?
She shot him in the heart because that's where the bullet ended up, Mr. Nelson. She was just shooting at the shooting at the body. It just happened to hit the heart. Don't give Amber a lot of credit for being some distinguished expert when it comes to marksmanship.
Well, could she have used something else, though?
Mr. Nelson,
if it's a man, yeah.
We've already said this. Back outside, call the police, and let them come and handle it. If she didn't do that, then everything she did afterwards is, poor tactics, poor judgment, and criminal. Especially if she didn't get any, because you're saying that she said, "Show me your hands." I mean, from what I was told, there was no verbal commands. But the fact remains, Mr. Nelson, she's by herself, she's off duty, and she should have the local police respond and handle it. Seriously. Nothing you say is going to change what I'm telling you. Look, if I was teaching a class of LAPD cops from Detroit or whoever right now, I would have told them the same thing. I have come home to my residence and found my residence open. I didn't go in. I didn't confront anybody. I called the local cops, got a position of cover just in case this person came out and confronted me. But I didn't go inside. I let the local cops handle it. And if nobody's inside, fine. Seriously. And for all you listeners out there, I hope you do the same thing. If you come home and find your door open, call the local police, let them handle it, because anything you do on your own, you're just subjecting yourself to criminal. You're subjecting yourself to possible civil, and more importantly, you're subjecting yourself to possible harm to you and your family. So I'm glad we're having this discussion because, there's somebody listening to your show right now who had an incident recently where he found somebody vandalizing his car. So he grabbed his gun to run outside. And I go, yeah, what would you do if you got outside and confronted this guy? You going to shoot this guy for vandalizing your car and go to jail for murder? But we got another break coming up.
Yeah, I'll let you finish on the other side. 800-450-7876 to speak to Mark. Take your calls next after the short break on AM 1450 WOL, where information. And thanks for staying with us, folks. Our guest is Mark from Anaheim. Number to call to speak to Mark, 800-450-7876. And Mark, I'm going to let you finish your thought.
Well, I have a question for you, Mr. Nelson. You're aware that this week they passed a law in Florida where teachers now can carry guns, right?
Yes, I heard that.
In the classroom. Because, after all, you know some people in Florida, don't you?
Yes, I do. Quite a bit.
So you take this woman who's been trained as a professional law enforcement person, and look what happened in her situation. How long do you think it's going to be before some teacher in the classroom that they deem is supposed to be what they consider certifiable to carry a gun, how long is it going to be before some student finds that teacher's gun and uses it in the classroom, or that teacher ends up getting into a situation where he or she feels necessary to use deadly force? Or that teacher feels the need to use deadly force, misses the student intended as the target, and hits another student. Nothing could go wrong with any of this, could it? We have lost our minds in this gun-crazed country. Meanwhile, suicide rate is astronomical among teenagers, among nurses. What's going to happen when a student in the classroom finds the teacher's gun and decides to kill him or herself with that teacher's gun? I mean, seriously, man. We have lost our minds. And when it comes to this Amber case, I just keep it simple, Mr. Nelson. I don't get into all the what ifs. You know, we always said in the Marine Corps, what if grasshoppers had machine guns, birds wouldn't mess with them. Like, we could do the what ifs all day. She went to the wrong floor, so she claims. She went to the wrong apartment on the wrong floor, so she claims. Now, was her door open? Did she use her key? Because, I mean, Mr. Nelson, there are a lot of things that people aren't being told. Because from what I was told, that apartment complex, guess what kind of keys they use to get in?
What kind?
Card key. Is anybody talking about whether or not a card key was used to open that door? There's a whole lot you ain't hearing in this case, Mr. Nelson. That's what I'm trying to tell you, man. This whole thing stinks. And it's being used now to, once again, foment hatred and anger. I know there were some people out demonstrating last night about the judge's conduct. Because we're emotional, you know. See, I was trained by Nazis, so I think with my head, I don't think with my heart. But we as black people, we're emotional. And there are a lot of emotional people upset about that incident. Because had she not been a cop, would she have gotten 10 years?
If she's white, well, you never know. She probably, you know, some people were even thought she'd get away, actually. She probably,
so I'm gonna throw it back at you now, okay? Because see, we're talking about a white female cop killing a black male. Are you aware in Greenville County, South Carolina, there was a cop who was found no criminal charges going to be filed at all? And do you know he did something similar? But see, you don't know about that. You know why you don't know about that? Because the victim was white. And that case is not going to cause emotions in the community. So nobody's talking about that. Here's a cop who went to a house, didn't have his lights on, didn't identify himself as a police officer, shoots a man in his own residence through the window. And no criminal charges at all are being filed against him. So while a lot of folks listen to this show want to make everything black or white, folks, this kind of stuff happens in this country every day, and it happens far more to white folks. But you don't hear about it because that can't be used to create anger, hatred, so we can go out and start the civil war that some people want. And because, you did an introduction on me today, Mr. Nuss, so let me remind the listeners who have never heard me before. Don't believe anything I say on this show today. I want you to go out and do your own research, and I challenge you to come back and say I've given you misinformation or disinformation. And yeah, white guy killed a white guy, and no charges filed at all. At least Amber had charges filed on her.
I want to get to the Civil War because you've been saying
the Civil War.
Time. Yeah. And now I'm hearing your president is using that phrase, the Civil War. If he loses, there's going to be a Civil War.
Well, of course.
Where he got that from?
Well, I mean, there are certain people in the community who have been supporting Donald Trump, and I have to go back and say, how do we get here, Mr. Nelson? For the folks out there, please listen to me carefully. It's called political science. Don't believe the hype when it comes to all the Trump tweets, okay? Very little happens in U.S. politics by accident. Politics is defined as conniving or deceitful. Look it up for yourself. That's what politics means. Conniving, deceitful. why do we put so much trust in people who call themselves politicians when the term means conniving and deceitful? So let's go back to 84, Mr. Nelson. Back in 1984, I was working down here in a company in Orange County, California. And we were opening the mail for people who were sending financial contributions to the Reagan campaign. I saw firsthand how old white folks were sending their hard-earned money and retirement money to support Reagan because they had no idea how the John Birch Society had hijacked the Republican Party, involved in war crimes down in Central America, Lebanon, and Iran. You know, people don't talk about the Iran-Contra, but all those Iran-Contra war criminals are back, Mr. Nelson. That's who these people are, like William Barr, Iran-Contra. So anyway, I quit that job because after being there and watching the mail and being open, what I noticed was if somebody had sent a check, a lot of them sent cash, by the way, but if somebody had sent a check or cash that was $50 or more, those letters were separated, while all the other folks who were still giving their hard-earned money, if it was less than $50, they just took the money out and threw the envelopes in the trash. Well, what I realized was, of course, they figure, well, if these old white folks are stupid enough to send $50, maybe we can get them to fleece even more. Well, Mr. Nelson, as I'm speaking to you right now, we have a Federal Elections Commission. The Trump administration has neutered them where they have really no power, no oversight, and nobody's paying attention to all the election campaign violations that's going on in this country as I'm talking to you right now, heading into the 2020 elections, okay? So I would imagine if I saw in 84 how they fleece old white folks listening to, you know, television and radio and believing the crap they hear. Right now, Mr. Nutt, they said something like 75% of the people who watch Fox News are what, 70 years old or older, or listening to AM radio. And I hear nothing but these folks being asked to send their hard-earned retirement money. I think the only people who compete with these conniving politicians for these old white folks' money more would probably be the local gambling casinos that's spending up all these retirement people's money. So what I'm telling you is you have to go back. So I said 84. Now let's fast forward to 2000 election. Now Al Gore ran with Joe Lieberman, right?
Right.
Joe Lieberman is Jewish. Al Gore couldn't even win his own state of Tennessee because, after all, that's where the Ku Klux Klan began. And yet Al Gore still won, and these folks are like, damn, we purposely sent Al Gore with Joe Lieberman so he wouldn't win so Bush could get in, George W., not Herbert Walker, and he still won. So they had to fix the elections through vote scam. And then Maxine Waters and others in the House of Representatives demanded to have the investigation on it. Al Gore was the president over that House. He could have given the vote because even though the House of Representatives demanded an investigation, they needed just one U.S. senator to ratify it, Mr. Nelson. Not one U.S. senator out of 100. Nor did Al Gore, who was the vice president at the time, none of them would allow Maxine Waters and them to investigate it, and you had George W. Bush in the White House. Let's fast forward to 2016. You got Bill and Hillary Clinton, who, by the way, told Hillary's cousin Donald Trump to run for president. Hillary was the worst candidate the Democratic Party could provide, and yet she still won. And they're like, damn, she still won. So once again, with vote scam, they had to come in and fix that election. And you started seeing precincts flipping over that had already said it was for Hillary, flipping over in places like Michigan and Wisconsin and other places. And all of a sudden, Hillary lost. Because the Democratic Party is facilitating this. Donald Trump wouldn't be where he is if it wasn't for the Democratic Party. Then you got them now with Donald Trump during his campaign. He's talking about draining the swamp. So in this country, Mr. Nelson, we have anarchists. And now anarchist is a person who believes all forms of government is oppressive and undesirable. Essentially, that's describing the Tea Party libertarians. They want no form of government, none. And these folks jumped on the bandwagon with Donald Trump because they believed that Donald Trump was going to drain the swamp, get rid of all rules and regulations. Then you also have the nihilists in this country, Mr. Nelson. Nihilists in this country believe that values are baseless and nothing is noble or can be communicated. You know, they're kind of crazy. Well, Steve Bannon was Trump's campaign manager, Steve Bannon, is a self-admitted nihilist. Trump promised to drain the swamp and to burn it down. And that's what he's been doing. In fact, even when he was still out there on the campaign trail, and since he's been elected, Mr. Nelson, I compare Donald Trump to General Sherman during the Civil War, going through the South, burning it down. However, I have to remind the listeners, Trump does not run this country. See, the problem with Trump is not doing anything any president didn't do before he came into office. The only difference with Trump, he's not polished as a professional politician. He simply does what everybody else is doing without sugarcoating it, without any nice fancy political spin to shape your public opinion. He just comes out and says, wait a minute, why are you all mad at me? This is how we do business. So when we come back from the break, I'm gonna break this down for you some more when we get back from the break.
Okay, yeah, I want to hear this. Folks, you can join us at 800-450-7876. After this short break, as Mark mentioned, right here on AM. For Mark from Anaheim, the number to call to speak to Mark is 800-450-7876. Before we get back to him, just want to remind you, tomorrow is an Open Phone Friday. Tomorrow will give you a chance to free your mind. If you didn't get a chance to call in this week or previous weeks, well, hit us up. Again, our number is always toll-free and worldwide. It's 800-450-7876. So, Mark, I'm going to let you connect the dots for us.
Connect the dots. I guess we're back on the air because I can't hear you when you come back. But anyway, so as I was saying before the break, okay, Steve Bannon was Donald Trump's campaign manager. He's a self-admitted nihilist. They want to burn it down, burn everything down. Now, Trump promised to drain the swamp and burn it down. And as I said earlier, it was Bill and Hillary Clinton who told Trump to get into the campaign. You know, Bill is married to Trump's cousin. You guys, you think I'm lying? Why don't you do your own research? So anyway, Mr. Nelson, in 2012, for example, Barack Hussein Obama received more money from News Corp than any other candidate who was running for president. News Corp is the parent company for Fox News. When Barack Obama ran for U.S. Senator, he received money from Koch brother-related donors. So while all white folks are watching Fox News, they don't even know, or they refuse to admit to themselves, that Fox News is owned by an Australian immigrant married to a possible Chinese spy. And the second biggest owner of Fox News is a Saudi Muslim who not only financially supports terrorist groups around the world, but funded the mosque that was built at Ground Zero World Trade Center. Now, since that time, there's been some change in management, and the Koch brothers, Murdoch's sons have pretty much taken over the running of much of the Fox enterprise. So already, Donald Trump and others are telling people they can't rely or trust Fox News anymore, so they're going to start their own separate, even more far right-wing television and radio networks. So you're starting to see more moderates, as they call it, come on Fox. I don't know because I don't watch television, but even Michael Steele now comes on Fox, but he can't come on Fox anymore. So now he goes on MSNBC. Even House Negroes like David Clark has been permanently banned from Fox because that's what they do with House Negroes. Once they use you, they don't need you anymore, and then they don't allow you to come back. But I was saying earlier, Trump does not run this nation, okay? Now, Trump is not a polished politician. He's just simply doing what every president before him did, and he just does it without sugarcoating it. He doesn't use the fancy political spin to shape public opinion when he's doing it. He doesn't make you feel good while he's peeing on your foot and telling you it's raining. And so a lot of Republicans, as they call it, the established Republicans or the deep state, as they want to call it, they don't like the way Trump operates because Trump is like, what's the problem? I'm just doing what all you other guys are doing. I just don't hide it. Okay? He's just out in front. In fact, that's why some people voted for him. They voted for him because he was right out and open. But he's such a narcissist that he started believing that he's running this country. Now, when Bill Clinton was, starting to believe he ran this country, a Cessna airplane crashed on the White House lawn. When Barack Obama started believing he was running this country, a guy with a backpack was inside the White House who had no business being there while Michelle Obama and the daughter were in the White House. Now, when Trump started believing he was running this country, all of a sudden an unauthorized Chinese woman was discovered down in his Mar-a-Lago compound. You know? But I guess Trump didn't get the message. And so what does Trump do? He's been firing all these John Birch Society folks that put him where he is without him even realizing how he got where he is. The most recent one was John Bolton. And I'm just going to tell you, listeners, you know me, I call a spade a spade. I ain't going to, like Dick Gregory says, ignorance doesn't have to be validated with the truth. When I saw John Bolton getting fired by Trump, Mr. Nelson, that reminded me of Alan Dulles being fired by JFK, John F. Kennedy. You know, John F. Kennedy refused to get the United States into these John Birch Society orchestrated wars in Cuba and Vietnam. Well, guess what? Trump has refused to get the United States into war orchestrated by John Birch Society in places like Korea, Venezuela, and Iran. So, as with JFK, Mr. Nelson, Trump's got to go. And just last week, Mr. Nelson, you had a guy named William Floyd Held. You ever heard that name? Held is his last name. William Floyd Held. This is a direct quote from William Floyd Held. It's treason, pure and simple. And the penalty for treason under the U.S. Code is death. That's the only penalty. The penalty under the Constitution is removal from office, and that might look like a pretty good alternative to the president if he can work out a plea deal. Well, the legal framework is under the U.S. Criminal Code, and the only penalty for treason is death. That's a direct quote from William Floyd Held. Now, William Floyd Held, for those folks who don't know out there, he's one of the staunchest, most far-right-wing Tea Party libertarians. He's running for president in 2020. And he has been in office before, Mr. Nelson, and has fallen from grace from his own personal scandals. But, you know, folks in this country have short memories. Now, of course, I would imagine most of the Tea Party libertarians following Floyd don't also know that he's been a long-time member of the Council on Foreign Relations, just as most of these other folks running for U.S. president. Don't believe me, folks. Look it up for yourself. Meanwhile, you got the Democrats. You know, the Democratic Party has been hijacked by the progressives the same way that the Republican Party has been hijacked by the Tea Party libertarians. And so now you have folks like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, you know, AOC, leading the charge since the so-called 2018 blue wave. So for all the folks out there listening today, I have a question for you. How many of you ever heard of AOC before she ran? Where did she come from? How'd she get there? See, I was taught well by my Nazi mentors. I don't focus on who did it when there's a crime. I focus on who benefits. I don't focus on who wins an election. I focus on who was it behind the scenes that paid for their campaigns or who was the campaign managers. So this is what I challenge your listeners out there, especially for all you folks who think, oh, my God, AOC is so dynamic. And it hurts me, Mr. Nelson, because I love my Puerto Rican folks, but oh, my God, AOC didn't come out of nowhere. Folks, do some research and find out who was AOC's chief of staff who just resigned. By the way, do you realize, Mr. Nelson, that her former chief of staff is now facing possible finance campaign violation crime charges?
No.
Yeah, well,
No.
That's why you bring me on the show. Meanwhile, this is the same guy who made his money out here in Silicon Valley, deep ties to Indonesia. More importantly, he not only wears the clothes, he's got people buying his clothes that features a photograph of a guy from India back during World War II that was in bed with Adolf Hitler in the SS Third Reich. Please, folks, come back and say I'm lying to you. That's who you guys are praising, AOC? Go back and look at her chief of staff and see who he is and who he's connected to. AOC's job is to help get Trump back in the White House in 2020, and you guys don't even know it. Because you think, wow, if they take down Biden, then maybe AOC and some other progressive like Elizabeth Warren's going to be in. Elizabeth Warren was a Republican. She wasn't always a damn progressive or a Democrat or whatever she's calling herself now. These folks flip back and forth anytime they want. That's politics. Deceitful, conniving. Ronald Reagan was a Democrat. Hillary Clinton was a Republican. Hell, Hillary Clinton was a John Birch Society. You know, she was one of Barry Goldwater's girls. And you folks fall for the okie doke every time. These folks don't care about you. They never have. And so what's going to happen now, you'll see the dialogue and the twist from, Trump might be dirty, but Biden's just as dirty, because the only person on the Democratic ticket right now, Mr. Nelson, that Wall Street has said that they would support is Biden. So the only true threat to Trump's reelection is Biden. By the way, Trump already has enough electoral college votes, and he already has Wall Street's backing to be reelected. However, since Trump has really stepped on it this time with going so far as getting rid of Bolton, there's some irons in the fire right now. I'll say that, Mr. Nelson. You might see a Pence, Nikki Haley from my state of South Carolina, or you might see somebody else. Hell, David Petraeus might come out of the ashes. They've already remolded him as a, like the Amber in court yesterday in Dallas. Well, David Petraeus now is a born-again Christian, so he would be the perfect guy that they could have running for president in 2020. If they feel now that Trump is just so uncontrollable, they can't deal with his unvarnished way of running things. I hope that helps to connect the dots and help you guys figure out what the hell is going on. John Birch Society is running things, folks. You go back and look at Joe McCarthy, and you see what's being done back then, and it's being done again today. They emerged during the Reagan years. Nixon didn't go along with their plans, so they had to take Nixon down. And, of course, that set the precedence because Gerald Ford pardoned Nixon. So no matter what happens to Trump, Mr. Nelson, what do you think is going to happen if he gets impeached? First of all, Bill Clinton was impeached. Did Bill Clinton leave the White House? Well, let's say Trump leaves the White House under criminal cloud. Do you think he's going to not be pardoned?
Oh, of course. They cut that deal.
Well, all right, I got to be careful how I say this. My sources tell me this. Trump is already cutting a deal to include his family being exempt from criminal prosecution, and he may resign.
Well, you know what? I got to mention this because they tell me that Pence is schedule is having out of Washington D.C. He's trying to put some distance between what's going on in
but Trump's already throwing him under the bus.
Yeah.
Even when do you ever see Trump and Pence together?
No, not really.
Exactly. Come on. These white folks didn't vote for Trump. They voted for Pence. They want an authoritarian, theocratic leader in the White House that's going to bring this country back into this far right-wing John Birch Society evangelical movement because they want an all-out caliphate. Armageddon, folks. Just like over in Saudi Arabia and the Wahhabist countries. Just to show you how morally corrupt this country is, Mr. Nelson. You had a Saudi missile hit a school bus in Yemen, killing 30 people, mostly children. No uproar in this country. Then you have missiles that hit a Saudi oil refinery that to this day we still don't know who's responsible for it, and there was all kinds of uproar in this country because oil is more valuable to us than those 30 school children. Those are the people we've elected. And Obama was no better. Hell, Obama had killed more people with drones in his first 2 months in office than George W. Bush did in 8 years in office. So while people are talking about Obama was a Muslim, the Obama administration, please come back and challenge me and tell me I'm lying to you. The Obama administration had killed more Muslims with drones in Obama's first 2 months in office than the George W. Bush administration had done in 8 years.
So he, too, was following orders.
Let me ask you a question, Mr. Nelson, because, I like to put you on the spot. Because, see, for you listeners who don't know this, Mr. Nelson is one of the most intelligent men I've ever had the pleasure to know. But he's very humble, so after the break, I'm going to give him a question.
All right, we're going to take that break. You're going to put me on the hot seat. Folks, you too can join. We put you on the hot seat, and you can ask Mark a question at 800-450-78...
WKYS HD3 Washington, WPRS HD3 Waldorf, and worldwide at WOLDCnews.com.
Welcome to the Carl Nelson Show
on Washington, D.C.'s 1450 WOL radio and live around the world on WOLDCnews.com.
And thanks for staying with us, folks. 6 o'clock straight up in Washington, D.C. Our guest is Mark from Anaheim. Well, that's not his real name. He's not really from Anaheim as well, but it's just giving us some eye-openers. And Mark, we got a bunch of folks who want to talk to you as well. So you said you're going to put me on the hot seat, so I'm ready.
On the hot seat. Okay, so, a lot of folks love, especially the liberals and the progressives, they love to repeat Eisenhower's, the military-industrial complex. That's not what Eisenhower originally said. Eisenhower said, be wary of the military-industrial congressional complex. And before they aired that, they took congressional out. Because Eisenhower was telling you back then that they were all in bed together. And Congress does what the lobbyists tell you to do. And Eisenhower wasn't any saint. I mean, seriously. Folks have no idea the difference between Eisenhower and predecessors, instead of going into war using us as like the Army, Marine Corps, etc., they turned to the boys over at Langley. So, that's when we had things like Mossadegh getting taken down in Iran. Instead of using our formal armed forces, use special activities divisions out of CIA. And, they tried to do it in places like Hungary and, all around the world, Indonesia, speaking of Indonesia. And, that's what we do. So when people sitting here talking about whether Ukraine or Russia tried to have an effect on the U.S. elections, that's what we do. So the question I have for you, Mr. Nelson, so Eisenhower, he did his 2 terms, and they wanted Nixon to be president. Well, Nixon's naval intelligence, but they stole the election from Nixon and gave it to Kennedy. Well, Kennedy's naval intelligence. Kennedy didn't go along with the old boys. John Birch Society got tired of him, so they got rid of him. So they let Johnson run things. Johnson was naval intelligence. So Johnson stays in for 1 term and realizes the dirty deals and backdoor deals that was going on to keep the Vietnam War going to impact, Johnson's chances for re-election. So Johnson says, I ain't going to run. I ain't going to take the damn nomination. So, Nixon won because they accused McGovern and other people of having psychiatric problems, even though Nixon was taking psychiatric drugs because this country's dumb. Well, I already told you, Nixon was naval intelligence. But Nixon didn't go along with the program, so, John Birch Society got rid of him. And, Gerald Ford came in for a little while, but, we had things like the Church Committee going on. Oh, by the way, Gerald Ford, naval intelligence. So we have to bring in somebody from the other side to make people feel good. Can't bring a Republican back in again, so who do they bring in? Jimmy Carter. Had you ever heard of Jimmy? This is putting you on the spot now, Ms. Had you ever heard of Jimmy Carter before he ran for president?
No.
Naval intelligence. So, Jimmy Carter's in for 1 term, and obviously they thought that he being an evangelical, I don't think most of you folks even realized that. They thought he was going to do the right thing, but Jimmy Carter actually was a good Christian. He was a decent white Christian man. So they had to get rid of him. So, you hold the hostage for 444 days, make sure that Carter doesn't get reelected. You bring in Reagan, but he has to bring in Daddy Bush, Daddy Bush, naval intelligence, and CIA. So, what I'm trying to say to you is nothing in politics happens by accident. But out of all these presidents, Mr. Nelson, Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon, Ford wasn't around long enough, so I won't count him, Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Barack Hussein Obama. Out of all those presidents before you ever had Trump, Mr. Nelson, name me one of them that's not guilty of war crimes.
They all are on the surface.
So what are we talking about? Why are we holding Trump to a higher standard than these other guys? By the way, I know I know a lot of folks down here in Orange County listening because, George W. is going to be here in the city of Orange in a couple on the 8th. I don't think I'm going to go to that bash, though. I'm keeping a low profile these days, sort of, kind of. So let's bring on the listeners, Mr. Nelson. I just hope the folks have some succinct questions. Please only ask one. And if you ask more than one, I'm only going to answer one because every time we do this show, a lot of people want to call in, and people try to ask me these 20 questions in one. I'm only going to answer one question, so make it your best.
All right, let's go. 800-450-7876. Kiki's up first, calling from Iowa. Kiki, your question for Mark.
Hey guys, thank you for taking my call. My question is for Mark. I asked you yesterday too on Facebook. Can you talk about the Orange Revolution in Ukraine and how that relates to what we're going through now? Because it has similarities, what happened in 2006 to what happened in 2016 in America.
Yes, so, Mr. Nelson, I think it was maybe about 7 years ago now, I came on and told your listeners about how Russia wasn't a threat to us. And one of the things that happened after the so-called Cold War ended was the Reagan administration, and then, of course, the Bush administration, because it was actually Bush who went to the island of Malta, where Lord Maitreya, there's one for you guys to look up. He's dead now, but Lord Maitreya, the New Age god. Lord Maitreya was the island of Malta when they signed the peace accords and the end of the Cold War. And one of the things that the Bush administration, and then, of course, Bush didn't get reelected, so Clinton promised was we would not turn all of the former Soviet bloc nations into NATO satellite states. And the first thing the U.S. did, well, first of all, we put Yeltsin in office over in Russia. But slowly but surely, all of the countries that were formerly the USSR were toppling as dominoes and now have weapons for NATO in their countries that could easily reach Russia. The only two left was Crimea. Well, the only two left are Crimea and Ukraine. And Russia is surrounded on all sides. So what happened is you have U.S. senators. John McCain used to lead the way on this, by the way. But you had U.S. senators on both Republican and Democratic side that were going into Ukraine. And Barack Hussein Obama signed the budget. I even did a nasty post on Facebook about it. So let me get this right. Barack Hussein Obama just signed a bill by the Republican Party, who runs the Congress, that's giving billions of dollars to Ukraine, but we're cutting people's welfare benefits in this country? Now, I will say that even though Barack Hussein Obama signed it, it didn't really go into full effect until after Donald Trump came into the White House. But we've been... The U.S., when I say we, the U.S. has been involved in politics over in Ukraine, which is becoming a very fascist country. I mean, hard right-wing fascist. And I remember telling you this, Mr. Nelson, 5 years ago on a telephone call. I was on the internet one day trying to do some research on Ukraine and came up with one of my articles. Because people in Ukraine are reading my stuff on Facebook and copying it and sending it back to people all over Europe. I was like, dang. So what ended up happening is, Kiki, with this so-called Orange Revolution, fascism is going on around the world. It's not confined to the U.S. Murdoch was the biggest threat to what semblance of democracy we still had left. Murdoch destroyed Australia, then Murdoch destroyed Great Britain, and now Murdoch has destroyed the United States. And this was all, predicted in a book by Alvin and Heidi Toffler called War, Anti-War. That book came out in 1994 telling you that just like in Bosnia, if all you hear is right-wing media that sounds like David Duke, you're going to be in a civil war. Well, that's what they've been doing in the United States. They've taken over and now it's Sinclair trying to get 75% of all television stations, with House Negro Armstrong Williams leading the way to get that deal done. Once they get the Trump network into place, whether Trump's in the White House or not, they will rule. But this is going on in Ukraine. This is going on in France. This is going on in Brazil. This is going on around the world. Fascism has reared its ugly head like it has never done before. Nothing prior to World War II compares to what's going on today, which is why I came on this show back in 2012 after not doing radio shows for more than 10 years, saying this country's headed for both a civil war and a world war, because it's by design. It's frustrating for me because it's so plain for me to see it, and I don't understand why other people can't see it. And so now you got folks like Tom Hartman, by the way, the son of a John Birch Society member, who is now saying things on his radio show that I came on this show and told people back in 2012. And I only came back because I just couldn't, I couldn't sit by on the sidelines anymore after seeing the murder of Trayvon Martin. So what you're seeing going on in Ukraine, don't believe the media, what they're telling you. We have subverted the democratically elected people in Ukraine, and we're trying to put our people in, and Russia's trying to fight it because Russia's going to be surrounded on side with Ukraine and Crimea gone. What else does Russia have left? We reneged on all of our promises after the Cold War not to surround Russia. We have surrounded Russia. And we've got people believing that Russia's the big bad enemy. Russia has an aircraft carrier that has to be towed by 2 tugboats. Look that up and see if I'm making it up to you. Even during the Cold War, Mr. Nelson, they had it's the same old aircraft. They had 1 aircraft carrier. Now, I'm a Marine. He with the strongest Navy rules the world. Russia doesn't have a Navy that can compete with us. China's getting one together, though. And right now, as I'm speaking to you, China and Russia are doing naval operations near Iran because all these John Birch Society guys were trying to push Trump into a war in Iran. So let's folks, I'm glad Kiki asked this question because I want you to know something. We have a break coming up, but I got to tell you something about Trump.
All right. 800-450-7876. If you got a friend, tell them that Mark from Anaheim's on the radio. We're right. This is Mark from Anaheim. The number to call to speak to Mark is 800-450-7876. I mentioned a bunch of folks already holding. Yes, I'm sitting down.
Okay. I'm no fan of Donald J. Trump, right? Mm-hmm. I know who Donald is. I was born in Manhattan. I know all about Trump. And it's hard for me to say this, but you know me, I call a spade a spade. Trump is probably the only person preventing us from going into World War III, which is why he's going to have to be resign or leave office. And folks don't even realize that. See, Trump talks a lot of crap. He's a criminal. He's got his mafia ties, but that's domestic. His mentor was Roy Cohn, lawyer for the John Birch Society and the mob, but that's domestic. See, now he's playing on the big boys level, and he started to really believe he's running this country. And these folks had a plan in place to take down certain countries over in the Middle East, as they call it, because I call it Africa. And so Syria and Iran are the only 2 countries remaining. And they want Trump to go in there, being the narcissist he is, thinking he's such a great guy, and do what they tell him to do. Trump is standing in the way, folks, because Trump's not a warmonger. He's never been a warmonger. So while on the surface it looks like Trump is the evil guy, and I have very little sympathy for him, I've been telling folks for years who Trump was, and I refused to go to LAPD celebrity golf tournaments when they held it at the Rancho Palos Verdes golf course because I knew who Trump was. But at the same time, I'm telling you folks, Trump has proved, I would never thought I would have said this 4 years ago, Mr. Nelson. Trump has proven to be the greatest reason why we have not already gotten into the world war that I told you was coming. And if they take him out, whether it's by impeachment or force him to resign, stand by.
All right. We'll watch that. 800-450-7876. Terry's on line 2, calling from Ohio. Terry, a question for Mark.
Mark from Anaheim. How you doing, sir?
Every day's a holiday, sir.
I'm glad you said that because a lot of people may not realize that Hillary Clinton is a neo-conservative.
Hell yeah. That's why the Russians were afraid of Hillary getting in there.
Right. So my question for you is, what would Joe Biden's purpose be if the John Birch Society chooses him to be in office?
Thank you. And I'm sorry because when Kiki asked that question, I meant to say this, so I'm so glad you called to ask this. Just like Donald Trump, Joe Biden is an old white man who's a narcissist, and he likes to run his mouth. And now, because he ran his mouth, it's being used against him. Joe Biden bragged about how he got rid of the prosecutor over there in Ukraine when he was not responsible for that happening. And that prosecutor getting removed in Ukraine had nothing to do with Joe Biden's son. But because Joe Biden now has been caught on tape saying it, they're using his own words against him. Seriously. So Joe Biden, you know, he didn't support busing back in the 70s. A lot of people didn't support busing. But Joe Biden's an old white man. This is what they gave you. Bernie Sanders, old white man, who now is having heart problems. They gave you Donald Trump, old white man. They gave you Joe Biden, old white man. Okay? These folks are out of touch with the United States and what we live in today. They don't know what it's like to live in our neighborhoods. They don't know what it's like to be out there on the streets begging for food. Joe Biden is loved by the Wall Street crowd because Joe Biden is not a threat to them. Elizabeth Warren, she's a threat to them. And so Bernie Sanders, he's not a threat to them either. But see, we have to keep dumbing down this country into believing that anybody who's a socialist, that's equal to communist. So, you know, since most people in this country don't know that, well, I'll just say this to you, Terry. Right now, if I were to say the top 20 countries in the world that are the most desirable places to live, the U.S. doesn't even make the top 20. And out of the top 20, they're all socialist countries. So Joe Biden will keep on doing what the people who truly run this country want. And if you want to know who runs it, it's the bankers and the corporate industries. It always has been. That's why when Franklin Delano Roosevelt stepped out of line in the 40s, well, actually in the 30s, they were planning on taking him out. And the people behind that coup were guys like, you know, Remington and U.S. Steel and DuPont, all of the big corporate financiers. And so what happened was, interestingly enough, they called FDR a communist and a socialist. And it was FDR's New Deal that saved these corporate capitalist fascists from all going under. FDR's New Deals were the programs that came into play. Because prior to New Deal, we had no middle class in this country. FDR's New Deal established the middle class, which gave the corporate fascists more customers. The problem is, as soon as FDR was gone, you had elected officials to try to erode everything that was part of the New Deal. So each time, every 2 years, because, you know, congressmen, House of Representatives are elected every 2 years. Every 2 years, more and more of the New Deal would be whittled away. And by the 1970s in this country, the middle class, and for you folks don't even know this, because I'm old enough to remember this. And Terry, are you still there?
Yes, sir.
Are you aware that in the 1970s, your wife couldn't get a credit card in this country?
Wow.
See, this is what I'm trying to tell you folks. It wasn't that long ago. White women, no women in this country could get a credit card in the 1970s. Now, they had to change that because by the 1970s, they had whittled down most of the New Deal that FDR had established, and capitalism was once again going bankrupt. So what they did was people were now starting to get access to credit cards. We didn't use credit cards in this country before the 70s because the attitude in this country was if you couldn't pay for it in cash, you don't need it. And they kept the minimum wage stagnant. People's salaries were stagnant, and people were living off credit. And that's where we are today, living off credit. So I love that question you asked because Biden was part of that. You look at the people who were behind the scenes that destroyed the savings and loan. John McCain should have gone to prison, but he got off. Look at all these old white men like Bernie Sanders them today and see what their roles were back during the time of the BCCI scandal, the savings and loan debacle. The savings and loan is how middle-class people in this country bought a house. So they got rid of it, stole all the money, because that's what capitalism is. Capitalism, pure capitalism, cannot exist the way it's set up. And when they find that they're going bankrupt, they have to find another source of food consumption. and they will destroy that particular portion to keep their shareholders happy. You look at pharmaceuticals. One of the biggest pharmaceutical CEOs said, "My job is not to be concerned about the customers, the consumers, or the patient. My job is to the shareholders. They don't care about charging you $800 for a pill because their loyalty is to the shareholder." And when we have this reduction in wars around the world, who gets hurt the most? The arms industry. We have to create new wars around the world to keep the arms industry, because once again, they are obligated to their shareholders. You can't keep showing a profit every damn quarter. So what they started doing, especially in the 80s, they started doing, because, with the regulations on the banking industry that changed to deregulation, they started doing hostile takeovers of companies. My company is failing, so we'll just take over your company, destroy everybody's pensions from that company, gobble up that country, and the shareholders are happy. Because that's where they get their money from. They're getting the money by stealing everybody's pensions, medical plans, and dental plans. And we are so hell-bent on proving that capitalism can work in its pure sense. I'm not a communist, by the way. I'm just saying pure capitalism cannot work. It never has and never will. So we're right back to where we were in the 1940s, where FDR had the New Deal. And by the way, folks, this so-called Green New Deal that AOC is doing, very little of it has anything to do with the environment. I would suggest you folks do a little research into that Green New Deal and see what it's all about. They're trying to set up another system that FDR did, because if they don't, capitalism as we know it in this country is gone. Yet you got these old white folks who really believe they can make capitalism work, and they're fighting it. So depending on who wins, depending on what's going to happen, but I see the United States going down.
800-450-7876. Roy's up next. He's on line 4, calling from the ATL. Roy, you're on with Mark from Anaheim.
Hey, peace and love, brother. Pleasure to speak with you again.
Yes, sir.
Yes, I want to get your take on. I had a thought back with when Cliven Bundy, when President Obama was in office.
Oh my God! I'm glad you brought him up. Yes, sir.
Okay, so it made President Obama look weak because, well, this is my thinking. I want you to straighten me out on it. It made him look weak because you allowed militia groups to draw down arms against U.S. federal marshals. And the Obama administration didn't do anything about it. As I'm looking back at it now, I'm thinking that he was strategic for not pushing that issue, because it could, that could have been the start of the Civil War. And I think that's what they was trying to do. And, he kind of deflected from it. I just want to get your thoughts on that. Just looking back on that situation and, looking where we are now, that's it.
I'm not going to be egotistical and come on this show and say that, I would come on this show and the White House would listen to what I'm saying and then go out and do something the next day. But I'm going to tell you two things that I will remember. I remember President Obama was being pushed into going to war in Syria. Break's coming up. I'll come back and tell us after the break.
All right. Thanks, Roy. Thanks for your call. 800-450-7876. You too can speak to Mark from Anaheim. Your calls are next. Right here after the short break on AM 1450 WOL, where information is power.
The White House listened to me when I used to come on your show when the Obamas were in the White House, and then they'd go out and do something. But two things that really stand out, and you and I have had these conversations before. I will never forget when President Barack Obama was being kind of forced to go into a war in Syria. And then he fell for the okie doke of chemical weapons, and he says, "Well, that's the red line in the sand for me." And I came on your show, and I stated, "I hope the White House is listening, because they're setting you up. If you go into Syria, you will be impeached for not having gone to Congress to get approval prior to." And then the next day, the White House changed their position on it, and Obama didn't go into Syria. In fact, today, people use that to make fun of Barack Obama, because he said, "This is the ultimatum," and then he didn't do anything. The second thing, going back to Roy's question,
All right, before you do that, let me just fill in on the White House, the Obama White House, because there was a fellow over there who listened to the show religiously and tried to get me to come to the White House with these different functions, photo ops and things. And I kept turning him down. And one day he even put my name on the list that we're going to attend. And he's trying to get people, he was telling me he's trying to get people to the White House. I don't know what wing he works at the White House, but he's trying to get folks to listen to the show all the time. So there is some credence to what you said, but go ahead.
Well, I know there is, because I said something on your show one day, and the very next day, Michelle Obama, which was a Saturday, did a hashtag repeating what I said. I came on this show and told people where Memorial Day truly came from, and the next day, Barack Hussein Obama did a press conference talking about Decoration Day, basically quoting me word for word. Come on. Anyway, so the second thing, though, going back to Roy's question, was Clive and Bundy. When I saw that stand-up, I came on your show and I go, I hope the White House is listening. This is a setup, because they wanted to make Clive and Bundy the Randy Weaver of the Clinton years. For you folks who don't know it, Randy Weaver was one of these far right-wing militia, Tea Party libertarian, they call themselves populists, hate the United States federal government. They did a raid on Randy Weaver's home, killed his dog. Don't kill the dogs. There was a hellacious shootout, and Randy Weaver now is a martyr within the far right-wing militia movements. For you folks who don't know, another guy out there is Gordon Kahl, K-A-H-L. Gordon Kahl was shot and killed by federal troops, and no less, Arkansas, so they hate the Clintons for that one. But Gordon Kahl hated blacks, hated the federal government, considered themselves sovereign citizens. So the Clive and Bundy was a situation that they were trying to set Barack Hussein Obama up for a Gordon Kahl, Randy Weaver type scenario. And I came on the show and I said, I hope the White House is listening. It's a setup. I know it doesn't look good having these guys occupying what's really Native American land, and they're trying to claim it's their land. And I did a lot of Facebook postings on this that I sent all over the place, including the White House. I'm not going to take credit for it, but I have to tell you, you're right in your analysis that that was a very smart tactical move on Barack Hussein Obama's and the White House part not to make this guy a martyr. And today, Clive and Bundy and other people who were involved in that raid, they have sites on Facebook, by the way, too. And they are behind the scenes fomenting a lot of hatred and anger, buying up guns, getting ready for the Civil War. They're bigger and stronger now than during that initial federal land takeover.
All right. 800-450-7876.
So, Mr. Nelson.
From Jacksonville.
Mr.
Yes,
Nelson.
Hang on a second now. Yes, sir.
So you had people from the White House trying to get you to come over there, huh?
Yeah, well, who else did that? Oh, the Clintons did.
Oh, I know.
Got in trouble for not going.
Well, I know. Well, no. Bill and Hillary got mad at me because Bill was playing saxophone at the House of Blues here in Hollywood, and I wouldn't go. And once you turn them down for an invitation, you never go again. Plus, I turned down the opportunity for both a Fulbright scholarship and a White House fellowship under Clinton. And you had Cicely Tyson on your show out here in L.A., and she got mad at me because Cicely Tyson was one of the people who sat on the panel to select the White House fellowships, and she got mad at me for not pursuing that. Then I had Admiral Stanfield Turner. Stanfield Turner was former CIA director, but also, Navy Admiral. He got mad at me because I turned down the opportunity for the Fulbright scholarship. So anyway, but I say that all to you because for you folks out there who don't know what's going on, I had to do the posting today for this radio show on Facebook. Because if you think the White House is not listening, you're mistaken. If you think we're not being heavily monitored, I'm not saying you all, I'm talking about Mr. Nelson and myself. Mr. Nelson is now being blocked on his own site on Facebook, and they're accusing him of posting fake stories. Now, all he does is share stories from other links. And what I'm trying to tell you, folks, there was a very interesting thing passed. I actually had to hear this from far right-wing folks. I hate to admit that Breitbart was the ones who told us this was coming down, but I just tell you the truth, where they had passed this new thing that you can't just arbitrarily now copy and paste websites, because if it turns out something in that information was mistaken, they can now remove you from social media sites. See, if you folks notice what I do, I go and look at the stories, I read the stories, then I actually share part of the story from that website and provide you with the website. But I don't just arbitrarily copy and paste some website, their website information and post it on my site and I also don't let people post things on my site if I can't read it. A lot of people get angry because I know they're probably sharing good information, but if I can't read it, I don't post it because that's how they set you up to get you taken down. So right now, as I'm speaking to you, Mr. Nelson is coming under attack from Facebook for his site, accusing him of fake postings. And he actually had to send me the information today that I had to post so that you even know the show is coming on. We're under attack, folks.
That's correct. All right, 800-450-7876. Al, as I mentioned, in Jacksonville, Florida. Duval on line 6. Al, your question for Mark. Is Al there? I'm not hearing Al. All right, let's keep moving then. Let's go to line 5. Fixico's calling from L.A. Fixico, you're on with Mark from Anaheim.
Your one question for the week.
Yes, sir. Hotel Big Brother Carl and Mark, it's a pleasure. The impeachment process is a big pacifier, just like the Mueller report. President Trump has to be voted out with numbers that overcome the fraud factor. Impeachment is show business, and it will only energize his base. Our biggest problem is that we still don't have a charismatic candidate equal to President Trump. The U.S. Senate will not remove him. Remember, as an opponent, he is the world's greatest dehumanizer, and dehumanization is what really made America great. By dehumanizing everyone who was not a white male landowner. I'll say this, I'll ask my question. I'll be voting for Mark Charles, independent Navajo Indian. He can't win, but his platform is that we need a truth commission to expose the myth that America was created to give freedom, justice, and equality to all of the people. He is an expert on the doctrine of discovery, and he intends to create an alliance composed of race, gender, and class. My question to you, Big Brother Mark, does America need to finally hear the truth to move ahead?
I'm sorry, does America need to finally hear the truth regarding what?
About our creation story to move ahead, that it wasn't Santa Claus, it wasn't the Easter Bunny laying eggs, it was about dehumanization of people who weren't European Christians and giving them the right to do whatever they wanted to do. Does America need to hear that from a candidate to move ahead?
Well, I know the brother's being rhetorical when he says this, and I'm glad you call in, brother, because this past weekend I went to a Native American powwow, and I left. I couldn't stay because I was so devastated to see that it had only turned into a bazaar where most of the people selling their little trinkets there weren't even Native Americans. They weren't even indigenous people. Oh, by the way, for you folks who don't know, next week, October 14th, is Indigenous Peoples Day. And I was devastated. I did a lot of driving. I made a lot of sacrifices to go to this powwow. And when I saw what it had become, because Mr. Nelson will tell you, and I know Brother used to listen when we used to do shows here in L.A. with Native Americans, I was never for casinos. And the casino industry has basically corrupted most of your Native American tribes now where they can get these casinos, and they have bought off certain members while the vast majority of people in the Native American lands are still suffering more today than they were before. I'm very familiar with the doctrine of discovery. I'm glad you mentioned that because for the listeners out there, if you want to know what this country is all about, if you want to know who John Bolton was all about, you have to go back and look at the doctrine of discovery. And the Supreme Court in this country, this century, ruled that the doctrine of discovery still applies. So we're not talking 100 years ago. We're not talking 200 years ago. We're talking now. So if you don't know what the doctrine of discovery is, I don't even discuss with people when it comes to Native American matters. And I run a Native American Facebook site on Facebook where I say that. If you don't even know about the doctrine of discovery, don't waste your time talking to me. And sadly, brother, most of the Native Americans I talk to don't have a clue what I'm talking about when I say the doctrine of discovery. So, yes, we do need a candidate out there. The problem is, sir, this country was founded on rum, tobacco, and slavery. And the people who came here don't give a damn about the people. They don't want the people to know the truth. 97% of all the media now is controlled by something like 4 corporations. So even if you have a brother out there who has the best intentions, how is he or she going to get that message out there if the media doesn't carry it? I'll give you a good example. And I just said this to Mr. Nelson on Monday. Last week, Bernie Sanders went up 5% in the ratings as far as his popularity. All the major media said just the opposite, that he had gone 5 points down. That's what's going on in this country.
All right, hold that thought. We got to take another short break. I'll let you finish that on the other side. And John in Long Island wants to talk to you as well. 800-450-7876. Those are the numbers to speak to Mark. Have your questions ready. We'll take them next, right here on AM. This number, as always, as we use, is toll free. It's also worldwide. It's 800-450-7876. And Mark, I told that John is holding for us. He got a question for you. He's calling from Long Island. John, your question for Mark.
Yeah, hold on,
Hang on a second, John.
Hold on before we go, John. God works in mysterious ways, okay? So I drive a lot of miles, and gas prices going astronomical out here. To avoid the traffic, I had to leave home like 4:30 in the morning to get to this powwow out in the Mojave Desert. But once I get there, I have to wait like 8 hours because it didn't start till 1600 in the afternoon. I ended up in Palm Springs, which I was not planning on going. And I ended up at the Palm Springs Air Museum. And Mr. Nelson, guess who I run into at the Air Museum in Palm Springs?
Who?
The son of Chauncey Spencer. Now, for you folks who don't know, Chauncey Spencer was one of the most legendary black pilots ever to exist on this planet. And when I went to this Palm Springs, they look at me because everybody in there is old white folks, fine. And they're doing all these different tours and stuff, and I didn't know who I am. But as I'm walking around, this black gentleman sees me, and he runs up to me, and he starts talking to me. He's freaking out because everything he's trying to throw at me is knowledge. I go, yeah, brother, I know. Yeah, brother, I know. Yeah, brother, I know. And they give him the smallest little area to put on history of black pilots at the Palm Springs Air Museum. And then when they bring the tour groups through, and I know this because I personally watched it, they have the tour groups go through every part of the facility, save his for last when they're running out of time. So he only gets to put out like 2 to 4 minutes of knowledge. And this brother has some knowledge because he's the son, Chauncey Spencer II. This brother, he's got knowledge on black female pilots, black male pilots, the Tuskegee Airmen. In fact, I will have to give Palm Springs Air Museum credit because they were the ones who did honor a gentleman who used to bring on your show, Mr. Nelson, who never even heard of the Montford Point Marines. And when I found out they didn't know anything about the Montford Point Marines, that's what got me involved. That ended up getting the congressional medals for the Montford Point Marines. So, it's amazing how God works in mysterious ways. So even though I was disappointed with my experience at that Morongo Basin powwow, I ended up at the Palm Springs Museum, Air Museum, where I got to sit down with a brother who realized there's some of us out here who are wanting to hear and share his knowledge. So I'm going to get him to hopefully get in touch with you because the knowledge that he has that we as black folks don't know, and you're not going to hear, just like that museum had no intentions of including any black pilots. That's what happened to me this past week. So I guess it wasn't all negative, but I'm sorry, John in Long Island. Please ask your question.
What's going on, my man?
Every day is a holiday, sir.
I just have a couple of quick questions. What is the current state of play with the intelligence community? Because all the privatization that's occurring. It started out with Larry McDonald and the Western Goals Foundation. I believe they're in Great Britain now.
And your other question, sir?
Well, yeah, it's related to McDonald's. It's about the KAL Flight 007. So, yeah, that's basically it.
Okay, so what we have right now in this country is the resurgence of the John Birch Society, thanks to Michael Steele bringing them back into the Republican National Committee. And then once he brought that back into the Republican National Convention, they got rid of him because they didn't need him anymore as the chairperson for the RNC. No white person would have ever been able to pull that off. Now, the John Birch Society is some interesting folks, okay? Like I mentioned Roy Cole earlier and Joe McCarthy. And these folks are so violent and so far right wing, but they're more importantly, they are the capitalists who truly believe in having no government regulations to stop them from making a buck. They will make a buck whatever it takes, and they couldn't care less how they destroy the U.S. population, human-wise, how they destroy the environment. In fact, I'm going to say this on your show, Mr. Nelson, that I've never said on air before. Well, I might have alluded to it a little bit. It's just like they know global warming is real. But they know without global warming, they can't get to that oil in the Arctic Circle. Okay,
right,
so they allow global warming. They don't care about the environment. It's all about the money. It's all about the power. So when you look at the John Birch Society with intelligence,
yes,
a lot of in fact, this is what I was trying to tell Chauncey Spencer II at that Air Museum, because they've got a huge display in that Palm Springs Air Museum on the flying tigers. And the brother wasn't aware. I said, dude, if you want to know about the John Birch Society, you need to go do some research on the flying tigers, because that's where they came from. John Birch was never a member of the John Birch Society. He's considered the first casualty in the war on communism because he was tortured and killed in China. Okay? And now these folks have emerged so much with their money and their power. Back in the 80s, LAPD had the big scandal with Public Disorder Intelligence Division, PDID, domestic spying on people they had no business spying on. Well, that all came under the auspices of Western Golds Foundation. Western Golds is a John Birch Society organization, and the leader was Larry McDonald. Larry McDonald was a congressman out of Georgia. Larry McDonald was the congressman in Georgia who was in an airplane, Korean Airline Flight 007, that mysteriously was supposedly shot down, but nobody's ever found any bodies from the crash. For you all who noticed, by the way, Nixon was supposed to be on that plane too, and for some reason, either Nixon got warned, I don't know, but Nixon decided not to get on that plane right before. I'm sorry, was it Nixon? Yeah, Nixon. Nixon didn't get on that plane, and there were some other people who didn't get on that plane before it left. Well, LAPD, because of the big spy scandal, had to dissolve PDID, and they just morphed into other intelligence divisions. But for the first time now, governments are always being under the microscope, and you folks got to realize, unlike what these Tea Party libertarians and John Birch are telling you, government is not your problem. It's the private companies that's your problem, because they don't have to follow government rules and regulations. So what LPDID ended up doing was becoming privatized. Western Golds relocated their headquarters over in Great Britain, which is how Murdoch and everybody else now has ruined Great Britain with the Brexit movement and fascism. Meanwhile, in this country, slowly but surely, with stupid TV shows brainwashing you like 24, he was a private contractor, not working CIA, Kiefer Sutherland. And so now, as much as 60% of CIA is privatized. Snowden was not CIA. Snowden was already involved in the scandal with CIA as private contractor. Then they let him go to NSA. He was not NSA. He was a private contractor. And you look at all the major spy scandals in this country in the last 10 years, and I guarantee you it's somebody who's a private contractor. That's what happens when you privatize companies and don't follow rules and regulations under the auspices of government regulations. So when you look at what's going on with this country today, they have become bigger, they have become more powerful, and they have become wealthier. And they're outsourcing all this intelligence to people who do not care about your security in this country. It's about making a profit for the different lobbyist groups that are involved. And so what happened with the World Trade Center? It created a whole new industry for people making money now, where you now can get a college degree in global war on terrorism. And I'm going to tell you straight out, most of the stuff they're teaching there is a bunch of crap. But they have to perpetuate these myths and rumors because it justifies them making money in the arms industry. So I hope that answers your question, John from Long Island.
800-450-7876. Mr. Amlak is calling us. Mr. Amlak is a metaphysician, an astrologist, and numerologist. Mr. Amlak, you have a question for Mark?
No, I didn't really have. I wanted to offer. Yeah, well, we hardly ever hear any. We have a lot of people come on the show that really get some interesting information on what's not being done correctly. But I haven't heard anyone say that as True Fathers lands on his feet, God is still in charge. So we keep throwing away the baby with the bathwater. I'm familiar with the doctrine of discovery, but I'm not familiar with anyone coming on the show talking about the metaphysical significance of America as illustrated in our coat of arms. So if we could focus more on that America, if you spell the word, it's the I am race. America was put together from an idealistic, philosophical, Masonic point of view to create a race of people who understood their divinity, I am race. So I'm bothered about the fact that we spend so much time on what America is doing wrong and not going into what we should be doing right. In terms of Brother Trump, I've been talking to you for years about the impeachment process coming up. And the thing we don't realize there is that signs in the sun, moon, and stars. We're still in the electromagnetic energy field that is bringing him to his knees. So we're looking at the problem, but I don't think we're looking at the solution enough. If we understood America's spiritual destiny as indicated by the red, white, and blue, white is purity, red is passion, blue is aspiration, if we focus on that happening, and those five-pointed stars representing spirit, soul, emotion, mind, and body, if we can make that happen. So really, I want our listeners to tune into that, to please understand that we're focusing on what's wrong and not what can be corrected.
All right. So thank you, Mr. Hamlet, because we're racing the clock. I thank you for your call. Mark, you want to comment on anything he said, or you want to take another call?
He didn't ask a question.
All right, we'll keep going because we're racing the clock. Linda's the next on calling from Clinton in Maryland on line 4. Linda, you're on with Mark.
Yeah, hi, Mark and Carl. My question is a simple question. When you say JBS, does that tie any way to this term that I hear, the one percenters and the oligarchs? I mean, is that all? Are they all one and the same, or what?
Okay, the JBS is not all one and the same. Like here in Orange County, California, because down here in California we're more well-heeled and wealthy. You won't even find the term John Birch Society where they try to call themselves the Welch Foundation, because Welch was one of the founding members. The Koch brothers' father was also one of the founding members. MacArthur's right-hand man was one of the founding members. So when you hear people like Trump saying, make America great again, it's not about make America white again. They don't believe this country has been great since MacArthur was forced to leave Korea, because MacArthur was planning on dropping the bomb on China. He was creating a false flag operation that was going to provoke China into getting into an incident that they could have dropped in the nuclear, because they don't care. And look, I'm just going to call a spade. I truly believe that the earthquake we had in California was a result of a nuclear test out of China Lake, because you have a whole generation of people now in the U.S. Armed Forces who have never seen an atomic weapon tested. And Trump has surrounded himself around John Birch Society folks who could not care less about using a nuclear weapon. As far as they're concerned, it's just another weapon in an arsenal. So to answer your question directly, as far as the 1% goes, the 1% is consisted of those who are the wealthiest of the wealthy. They're not all John Birch Society. You got some who are liberals. You got some who are communists. You got some who are Muslims. I remember doing the show with Mr. Nelson back in the 90s, and I said, people sit here and talk about Muslims and Christians and Jews. I go to meetings where these folks are rubbing elbows, making money, drinking. They couldn't care less about their religious point of view. They couldn't care less about their political point of views. All they care about is making money. So the true 1%, they have no allegiance to anybody but money. For those who want to find me at Mark from Anaheim, Political Sarcasm 101 on Facebook. That's the fan page, not the group site. I'll talk to you later, Mr. Nelson.
All right, thanks, Mark. Folks, thank you for sharing your afternoon with us. We got to get out of here. Stay strong, stay positive. We'll see you tomorrow on Open Phone Friday, right here on AM 1450.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for watching the video. This is True Power is Mine. As always, live your life with integrity, without hate, without envy, and or greed. Peace. Also, support me on Patreon. Patreon.com/join/True Power is Mine. I'm out of here.